Sometimes life feels like a collection of random episodes, as if an unseen force shuffled the cards and you were simply dealt this particular hand. You leave your home 5 minutes later than usual and suddenly meet someone who changes your life. You open an email or answer a phone call you could have ignored, and within a week, everything is different. You feel fine, make plans, think about the future, and then unexpected news arrives. A diagnosis, an illness, the realization that something inside you has changed even though you felt no warning signs. And sometimes fate makes such a sharp turn that the past seems to end abruptly, while ahead of you appears a new path you never asked for and never anticipated. We call this coincidence because it is easier that way. Coincidence removes responsibility, reduces anxiety, and creates the feeling that the world is unpredictable but at least fair. If it was random, then no one is to blame. If it was random, then it just happened. If it was random, then it could have happened to anyone. And in a certain sense, that idea can even feel comforting. But there is one strange observation that quietly destroys this convenient explanation. Events in life tend to repeat themselves, not in exact details, but in essence. The same types of relationships, the same pain appearing in different circumstances, the same words spoken by different people, the same feeling of finding yourself in a familiar trap once again. You change cities, jobs, environments, even your lifestyle, yet you keep encountering a similar inner script. And then a question arises that refuses to leave you alone. Why do certain events return again and again? Why do similar situations appear in different periods of life, as if the world is showing you the same picture with new scenery each time? Why does one person repeatedly face betrayal, another loneliness, another loss, while someone else is constantly placed in the role of rescuer or victim? Why do opportunities come easily to some, while others must fight through endless obstacles, as if an invisible force is testing their persistence? We can explain this through psychology, coincidence, personality, habits, childhood experiences, or the choices we make, and all of this may contain fragments of truth. But sometimes these explanations are not enough, because some coincidences feel too precise, too timely, too symbolic, and often we sense this not with the mind, but with something deeper, as if reality itself is communicating with us through events, as if life is not chaos, but a system, as if it has its own laws, even when we cannot see them. In ancient traditions, mystical teachings, religious doctrines, and esoteric knowledge, the same idea appears again and again. A human being does not live in emptiness. We are woven into a fabric of causes and consequences. Our choices leave traces. Our inner state influences the kinds of events that enter our lives. And what seems like coincidence may simply be the point where many unseen threads intersect. Threads that have been forming quietly over a long time. Imagine your life as a river. On the surface, the water may appear chaotic. Waves, currents, sudden splashes, random movement. But beneath the surface, there is a current. It directs the flow even when you cannot see it. And if similar situations keep appearing in your life, perhaps they are not random waves at all, but the current guiding you towards something important. And this is where we approach a subject that can change the way everything is perceived. The subject of karma and destiny. Why we meet certain people and never meet others. Why some doors open while others remain closed. Why loss can become a beginning and success can become a test. And why life so often reminds us that nothing truly passes without leaving a trace. But before we go any further, there is one simple question worth asking. It sounds almost unsettling because it takes away our most familiar excuse. What if coincidences do not exist? What if every meeting, every delay, every sudden turn, every strange sign is part of a deeper order? What if life does not scatter events at random, but leads us through experiences our soul needs? If this thought creates even a slight inner tension, then we are moving in the right direction, because awakening often begins with doubt and randomness. And from here, we can begin to explore what karma truly is, not as a punishment, but as a law that connects past and present, a law that may seem strict, yet ultimately empowers us by showing that much in life is not accidental, and therefore can be understood and changed. When people hear the word karma, many feel a subtle tension. It is often associated with punishment, debts from the past, something heavy and unavoidable. Karma is imagined as a strict judge, recording mistakes and presenting the bill sooner or later. But in its original meaning, karma is far deeper and far calmer. There is no anger in it, no revenge, no moral judgment. Karma is a law, not a sentence. The concept of karma comes from ancient spiritual traditions of the East. At its core, it means action, not only an external deed, but also an inner movement, a thought, an intention, an emotional choice. Karma is not what happens to us. Karma is what we set in motion, often without realizing it. Every inner state leaves a trace. Every decision shapes a direction, and life simply responds to what has been sown. It is important to understand one thing. Karma does not punish. It reflects. It works like a mirror, returning energy in a transformed form. Sometimes immediately, sometimes years later, sometimes through different people and circumstances. This is why karmic consequences are not always obvious. We may forget what we once felt, what we wanted, what fears we carried within us, but the imprint remains, and one day it appears as a situation that seems external and unexpected. Imagine that thoughts, words, and actions are seeds. You scatter them into the soil of life. Some sprout quickly, others remain hidden for a long time, waiting for the right conditions. You may not remember when you planted a particular seed, but when it begins to grow, you encounter its fruits. This is why people sometimes sincerely ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They do not see the connection between past and present, but karma does not require memory. It only requires the fact of action and the inner state at the moment of choice. Intention plays a crucial role. Two people may do the same thing outwardly, yet the karmic imprint will be completely different. One acts out of fear, the other out of love. One from a need for control, the other from a sincere desire to help. Karma is sensitive to inner positioning. It records not the form, but the essence, not the mask, but the source of the impulse. This is where the idea of individual karma appears. It is not an abstract fate imposed from the outside. It is a path shaped by a person's reactions, by how one responds to pain, by what one chooses under pressure, by how one treats oneself and others. Karma is built from small things, from the thoughts we have when no one hears us, from the words we choose in difficult moments, from whether we betray ourselves or remain honest. Why, then, does karma often not manifest immediately? Because life is a complex system. For an event to occur, conditions must align: people, timing, inner readiness, external circumstances. Sometimes a person needs to be ready to see the lesson. Sometimes the pain must become noticeable enough. Sometimes the illusion of control has to collapse. And then the karmic knot untangles through an event that can no longer be ignored. Karma can be compared to an echo. You shout in the mountains and the sound returns, but not always immediately, and not always with the same force. Sometimes it comes unexpectedly from another direction, and a person wonders where it came from. But if you listen closely, you can recognize your own voice. There is another important aspect. Karma is the memory of the soul. Not only the memory of this life, but a deeper memory of experience. It carries unfinished processes, unexperienced emotions, lessons once avoided. And if something was not understood, not accepted, not fully lived through, life creates conditions for us to face it again, not out of cruelty, but out of a movement toward wholeness. Karma is not interested in suffering, it is interested in awareness. Its goal is not to punish, but to teach. Not to break a person, but to bring them back to themselves. And the longer we avoid the lesson, the more insistently it appears. In relationships, in the body, in circumstances, in repeating patterns. Until we stop and ask ourselves what this experience is trying to teach us. At this point, it is important to pause, because understanding karma shifts the focus. A person stops seeing themselves as a victim of random events. They begin to notice connections. They begin to feel responsibility, not as guilt, but as strength. Because if the cause lies within, then the possibility of change lies there as well. But karma is not the whole picture. There is also destiny. And between these two concepts lies a subtle distinction that is often confused. To see it clearly, we need to understand where accumulated experience ends and where the path begins. The path that was chosen even before the first step was taken. When the conversation turns to destiny, many people feel an inner resistance. Destiny can sound like something rigid, something that steals freedom, as if the script is already written, the roles have been assigned, and all that remains is to walk along a predetermined line. That picture creates fear and a sense of powerlessness. If everything is decided in advance, why try, why choose, why change anything at all? But in a deeper understanding, destiny works differently. Destiny is not a sentence, and it is not a chain of events you cannot escape. Destiny is closer to a route, a map, a direction of movement. It has key points, but between them there is space for choice. There are moments that seem marked on the map of the soul, yet the path toward them can unfold in many ways. It is important to distinguish karma from destiny. Karma is accumulated experience, the trace of past choices and inner states. Destiny is potential, what is placed within a person. It is a set of possibilities, lessons, and encounters meant to help the soul unfold. Karma describes what we arrive with. Destiny points to what we can grow into. Some things almost always belong to the sphere of destiny. Being born at a certain time, into a certain family, the body you arrive in, the basic shape of your temperament, and certain key meetings you could never truly avoid. Sometimes it is a person who appears only briefly, yet changes everything. Sometimes it is an event that divides life into before and after. These turning points are often felt intuitively. A person can sense that they are standing at a threshold, that something important is happening now, that this decision or this meeting carries unusual weight. And even if they resist, destiny seems to return them to that knot, gently at times, forcefully at others, not as punishment, but because the lesson is concentrated there. But even at these points, freedom remains. Freedom of response. Freedom of inner choice. Two people can go through the same event and emerge completely different. One becomes harder and closes off. Another becomes deeper and more honest with themselves. Destiny presents the situation, but who you become after it is still up to you. Awareness plays a key role here. When a person lives on autopilot, destiny feels rigid. Events pile up, lessons repeat, and the sense of powerlessness grows. But when attention appears, when a person begins asking questions not only of the world, but of themselves, destiny becomes more flexible. It is as if it responds to the level of understanding. That is why the same lessons return again and again, until they are understood. Life does not get tired. It patiently brings you back to the theme you are avoiding. It may be a lesson about boundaries, self-worth, responsibility, acceptance, honesty. The scenery changes, the people change, but the essence remains. and the moment the lesson is integrated, the old script loses its purpose and dissolves. Destiny can be compared to a river you travel along. If you are unaware of the current, it can throw you against rocks and pull you into whirlpools. But when you begin to feel the flow, you learn to choose where to move faster, where to slow down, where to step onto the shore. The river remains, but your relationship with it changes. It is important to understand that destiny is not against you. It does not try to break you or punish you. It tries to bring you back to yourself, to the version of you that exists beneath fear and masks, to the state where choices are made not from pain, but from clarity. And when we begin to see destiny not as a verdict, but as a dialogue, many things fall into place. We understand why certain doors remain closed, even when we desperately want them to open, and why other doors open, the ones we were afraid of. Destiny does not lead to comfort. It leads to growth, not to what is familiar, but to what is real. But even with this understanding, the main question remains: why do events unfold this way and not another? Why do some meetings seem accidental, yet change everything? Why do signs appear at the exact moment we need them? Why does life seem to speak to us through coincidences? To answer that, we need to look deeper into how reality works, and understand why, in life, nothing happens by chance. Sometimes life begins to speak to us with unusual clarity, through coincidences that are impossible to ignore. You think about a person, and they suddenly message or call you. You search for an answer for a long time, and then casually hear a phrase that lands with perfect precision. You hesitate, unsure whether to take a step, and suddenly an event occurs that gently pushes you in a certain direction. These moments are often called synchronicities, and the more attentive a person becomes, the more frequently they begin to notice them. Synchronicities do not break the laws of the world. They simply reveal that reality is more deeply connected than it appears. The inner and the outer are in constant dialogue. Our states, expectations, fears, and hopes create a certain field in which events begin to arrange themselves. And when the inner aligns with the outer, a sense of meaning arises. Not because someone is controlling us, but because we have entered resonance with what is happening. Pay attention to the people who repeat in your life. Similar personalities, the same words, the same scenarios. Sometimes they are partners who initially seem different, yet eventually lead to the same pain. Sometimes they are friends whose relationships end in identical ways. Sometimes they are bosses or colleagues who feel as if they were copied from the same template. This is not coincidence. It is the reflection of an inner pattern seeking completion. We attract not what we want, but what we are in a given moment. Not on the level of words, but on the level of emotion. Emotions work like magnets. If fear lives inside, life creates situations where that fear can be experienced. If there is a sense of unworthiness, circumstances appear to confirm it. If a person is used to self-sacrifice, there will be those willing to receive it. Not because the world is cruel, but because the lesson has not yet been completed. Very often, the root of such situations reaches back into past experience, into childhood, early decisions, moments when a person formed conclusions about themselves and about the world. These conclusions become filters through which reality is perceived. And then events begin to confirm what is already believed. Not to punish, but to make the belief visible. The connection between present events and past experience is not always obvious. Sometimes it is direct, sometimes symbolic. Loss may point to a fear of attachment, conflict to unexpressed anger, illness to long-term self-neglect. Life rarely speaks plainly. It speaks through images, sensations, repetitions, and the longer a person does not listen, the louder the signal becomes. A special place is held by karmic encounters. These are people who do not arrive by chance. Their roles can differ. friends who support you in a difficult moment and disappear once the lesson is learned, adversaries who cause pain but force you to recognize your strength, partners with whom the connection feels immediate and deep, as if you have known each other for a long time. Such meetings often trigger strong emotions: attraction, rejection, fear, fascination. This is a sign that a deep theme has been touched. Karmic people rarely stay simply for no reason. They appear to reveal something, to show something, to bring something to completion, sometimes through love, sometimes through conflict. And when the task is fulfilled, the bond may weaken or disappear. This can be painful, but it is how life clears space for what comes next. There are also fateful moments that change everything. One decision, one conversation, one step taken despite fear, or just as often, taken because of fear. After such moments, life is divided into before and after. And looking back, a person often realizes that everything was leading to that point, that every small detail was guiding them toward a moment of choice. Coincidence is the name we give to what we do not yet understand. But when you begin to look deeper, patterns become visible, sometimes complex, sometimes painful, but never chaotic. And the more awareness grows, the clearer the language of life becomes. And then another important layer of understanding appears. Not everything begins in this lifetime. Some scenarios stretch across generations. Some emotions and fears seem to be passed along an invisible thread. To understand this, we need to touch on the subject of ancestral karma and past incarnations. It is there that answers are hidden for what appears inexplicable and irrational. Sometimes a person feels that they are not living only their own life. Someone may fear poverty without ever having known hunger. Another may carry a sense of guilt without a clear reason. Someone may repeat the fate of parents or ancestors again and again, even while consciously wishing for a different path. In such moments, we encounter what is called ancestral karma. Ancestral karma is not punishment for the sins of ancestors in a primitive sense. It is the transmission of experience, energy, and unresolved themes from one generation to the next. A family is not only blood and genes, it is a field of memory. Strong emotions, trauma, fears, vows, losses, and resentments are stored within it. What was not lived through or accepted does not disappear. It seeks expression, and often it finds that expression through descendants. This is why the same scenarios repeat so often within families. Illnesses appearing at similar ages, divorces unfolding as if by the same script, loneliness passed from mother to daughter, poverty no one seems able to escape despite effort. This is not a verdict, it is a signal. The family line is pointing to where energy is stuck, where the story is asking to be seen. It is important to understand that a soul does not choose a family by accident. From an esoteric perspective, a person comes exactly where there are tasks resonant with their inner experience, where healing is possible not only for oneself, but for an entire lineage. Sometimes a single conscious individual can transform a pattern that has lasted for decades, not through struggle, but through understanding. Ancestral karma often reveals itself through emotions that feel disproportionate to the situation. Intense fear without visible danger, deep sadness without an obvious cause, a sense of obligation that can never be fulfilled. This is not weakness, it is contact with a deeper layer of memory. And when a person stops dismissing it, they take the first step toward release. Alongside the ancestral theme, the question of past incarnations naturally arises. Even when approached symbolically, the idea of past lives helps clarify one essential truth. The soul's experience is not limited to a single biography. Some lessons cannot be completed in one lifetime. Some themes return again and again until balance is found. This is why a person may feel an unexplained attraction to certain places, eras, or cultures, or an irrational fear of water, heights, fire, or enclosed spaces, or the feeling that someone is familiar, even when meeting them for the first time. This is not necessarily literal memory. It may be the echo of an experience that has not yet been completed. Unfinished lessons manifest as inner tension, as the sense that something important is present, yet slipping away, and life repeatedly creates situations where this knot can be untied, not to cause suffering, but to offer a chance for wholeness. It is important not to fall into fanaticism and explain every difficulty through past lives. This is only one level of understanding, but it helps reveal that a human being is more than a chain of random events, that the path has depth, and that much of what seems strange or illogical actually has roots. Awareness of ancestral karma and the soul's experience should not inspire fear. On the contrary, it restores strength, because once a pattern is seen, it stops running automatically, and where automatism ends, freedom begins. And it is precisely toward this freedom that the next essential step leads us. Awareness capable of changing the very course of destiny. At some point, a person begins to notice that they can no longer live the way they did before. Old reactions bring no relief. Familiar explanations no longer soothe. A quiet but persistent question arises inside. What if I am participating in what is happening to me? This is where awareness begins. Not as a fashionable concept, but as inner honesty. Awareness is the ability to see yourself in the moment, to notice thoughts, emotions, impulses without running from them or justifying them. It is the capacity to pause where you once acted automatically. Between stimulus and reaction, a space appears, and within that space, choice is born. As long as a person reacts automatically, destiny feels rigid. Events repeat, the same people appear, pain returns in familiar forms. But the moment awareness arises, the script begins to crack, because life no longer receives the same response. Where there was fear, there is now observation. Where there was victimhood, responsibility appears. It is essential to understand the difference between responsibility and self-blame. Awareness does not say, "You are guilty." It says, "You are capable of influence." This is a subtle yet powerful shift of focus. A person stops wasting energy on searching for someone to blame and begins looking inward, not to judge themselves, but to see where they repeatedly betray their own needs, ignore boundaries, or choose from pain. Karma changes through choice, not through dramatic external actions, but through inner shifts. Sometimes it is enough to stop agreeing where you always agreed before. Sometimes it is allowing yourself to feel what was long suppressed. Sometimes it is leaving a situation that once seemed unavoidable for years. These small steps alter the direction of the current. Inner change always precedes outer change. First, attitude shifts, then reactions, then decisions, and only afterward does the fabric of events begin to change. People who once appeared automatically no longer linger. Opportunities that once felt unreachable begin to arise without struggle. Not because the world has changed, but because the person no longer resonates with the old pattern. This can be seen in simple examples. Someone who feared loneliness all their life learns to be with themselves, and relationships begin to form differently. Someone who constantly sacrificed themselves learns to say no, and only those capable of equal exchange remain. Someone who lived in constant anxiety learns to trust, and life gradually stops testing their endurance. Awareness does not make the path easy, but it makes it meaningful. Life no longer feels like something that happens to a person. It feels like something they walk through together with it. Even difficult events lose their sense of randomness. They become points of growth if one is willing to see a lesson instead of a verdict. There is a feeling that often accompanies awareness, as if destiny begins to adjust, as if life responds more quickly, as if signs become clearer. This is not magic. It is the result of alignment between inner and outer worlds. When a person stops resisting their path, the path stops resisting them. And gradually, the fear of destiny fades. Because destiny stops being an enemy. It becomes a partner, a dialogue between the soul and experience. And in this state, a person begins to understand that they are not a victim of circumstances, but a participant in the process. One final step remains, gentle yet essential, a reminder that even when the path feels difficult, it holds meaning, and that behind every turn lies not chaos, but a deeper logic. When you look back on your life from the height of lived years, things become visible that once slipped past unnoticed. Events begin to form chains, encounters gain meaning, losses start to speak. What once seemed like a mistake reveals itself as a turning point. What felt like punishment becomes a lesson, and slowly a quiet understanding settles in. Nothing was in vain. Every situation carries meaning, even when it cannot be seen right away. Even when, in the moment, pain overwhelms understanding. Life does not seek to cause suffering. It seeks to lead a person toward wholeness. Sometimes through joy, sometimes through loss, sometimes through the dismantling of the old, to make space for the new. Even pain and loss have a purpose. They interrupt. They strip away illusions. They remove masks. They return us to what truly matters. The question of who you are beneath roles, expectations, and fear. And when a person finds the courage not to run from this question, life begins to reveal itself differently. Destiny is not a monologue, but a dialogue. It speaks to us through circumstances, people, emotions, recurring themes. And the more attentively we listen, the gentler its language becomes. The more honest we are with ourselves, the clearer the path appears. Destiny does not demand perfection, it asks for presence. And if at some point everything seems to be falling apart, it is important to remember, perhaps only what no longer serves is collapsing. What kept you trapped in an old script? What prevented a step toward yourself? Life rarely takes without reason. More often, it releases. Now I want to ask you a question that does not require an immediate answer. It is meant for silence, for an inner conversation. Look at your life and ask yourself what keeps repeating and why. Which situations return again and again? Which emotions surface most often? Which themes seem to be waiting to finally be seen? There is no accusation in this question. There is an invitation to stop seeing yourself as a victim of coincidences, to recognize in your story not chaos but a path, not punishment but learning, not a dead end but movement. And if after this video something inside you feels a little quieter, if there is a sense of recognition, if certain words resonated deeper than the mind, then this conversation was not accidental, just like everything else that happens in your life.